Welcome to part 3 of our solo play examination. This time around, is playing board games solo fun or not? Now you may think that we have already covered this, but in fact we've taken a kind of a reverse approach to the solo play phenomenon by looking at role-playing games first, adventure board games second, and now we're coming finally down to board games in general, or board games tailored specifically to solo players like Final Girl. Now, immersion is a big part of why we play games solo. Immersion into the world, we get into a flow state where our theater of the mind and imagination really gets into not just the theme, but also the mechanics. But does this work for every game? Or is this just more appropriate to thematic games and not to mechanically oriented games? First, let's establish some terminology here, because when we define certain aspects of our gaming hobby, there can be endless discussions whether it encapsulates the entirety of what we're talking about or not. And I'm not here to lay down any kind of 100% this is how it's supposed to be told rule or definition, but there are certain aspects that we need to look at in order to clarify what we're actually even talking about. So when I'm talking about immersion, for instance, I typically look at the world and the theme, the story of a board game or any other experience, but that doesn't actually take into account everything. There can also be a mechanical focus, an intellectual drive to master a certain aspect or a gameplay flow of a game. That too is immersion. Narrative is the same thing. When we think of narrative in the literal sense, we can think of story, but not, for instance, about the rhythm of a process. But that can also be a narrative. You can start very easily as you learn your way into a game and then get into the mode of things, into your flow state, and eventually you have enough experience to actually find all the detailed little strategies and the little tactical aspects of a game. And that is kind of a dramatic tension that goes up and down as you play a game. That too is the narrative of a game. And finally, the solo aspect of a game itself. What does it mean to have a solo mode? What is an automa, for instance? An automa is typically a fake player, an AI deck, if you will, an artificial intelligence deck, even though there's no real actual AI involved, but it can be a deck of cards that simulates a different player as you're playing through a game. Now, it doesn't, of course, take into account the variability that other players bring with them. If a player has a bad mood, they may play worse than another session where they're like hopped up on caffeine, have had 5 monster drinks to drink, and they're really going at it. Of course, that doesn't apply to an automated deck of cards simulating that player. But that is the best that we can actually hope for in a tactical game or in a more mechanically driven game. Now, co-op games, which you play with other players, are not typically solo games, and they don't have solo modes to them, but you could actually play them solo. So in that aspect, you could say that a co-op game is technically also always a solo game. You're just maybe playing multi-handed. In other words, you're playing multiple characters in the game. You may have like different hands of cards that you have to manipulate. And then there's also true solo, like the lone wolf concept, where you truly are just playing one character at a time. We've gotten the terminology a little bit out of the way. Now let's look at the various forms of solo play that you could have in a primarily mechanical game. You could have the beat your own score aspect, where a mechanically crunchy game requires a certain learning in you mastering the skills in order to get not only better, but maybe eventually the only way to beat the game. Maybe a game is easy to beat, but the variety of scenarios can be from easy to difficult, and so you would always try the easy one first, the medium one second, until you finally defeat the hell mode or the demonic mode, because it's so incredibly powerful to beat. There is also an effectiveness that needs to be reached, and that's fine, but what about efficiency? Efficiency is even better. If you have an achievement list that says like, okay, you won this game, but have you also plucked 50 different types of fruit, or defeated 10 kinds of enemy, or won 100 gold and traded the 100 gold into 15 different types of goods. Those achievements can also be something that you might want to chase. There's a certain determinism in these kind of mechanically driven games, a certain amount of control and finesse, fine-tuning that you enjoy doing as a solo gamer. It feels good when you solve a puzzle. It feels even better when you solve a puzzle really well. That can also be a very strong motivator to play a game solo. No distractions from other players, no variability, just you and the game, and now you go and beat it. A lot of the more mechanically driven games, they thrive on replayability. Whereas adventure board games and role-playing games, you're always seeking variety and specificity in the experience, so every experience feels different. The more mechanically driven games are almost always the same. They could have some small tweaks left and right, more so mechanically than story-driven, because that's the nature of the game. But the replayability of a game is very important in you becoming better and better to truly master a certain system. Now, when a game is kind of unknown at the beginning and you work your way towards familiarity and then eventually to a close kinship with the game, that is a path of discovery of its own. And when we talk about discovery normally, we talk about discovery in the sense of you discover new things or new paths to wander. But discovery in a form of mechanically bettering yourself fashion can also be a very rewarding aspect into not just getting to know the game better, but feeling better about your own self and your capabilities in experiencing the game. That improvement cycle, that learning cycle is very important. And in a campaign of experiences with this exact same game, the exact same components, until near total success is achieved, can be very, very gratifying. One final word that I will say about solo play is balance. We've talked a lot about thematic games. We've talked now some bit about mechanical experiences, but you will see that Top Plot, our section about looking at games, always has a theme mechanical balance to it. Is a game more mechanically inclined or is it more thematically inclined? But no matter where you are on the spectrum, a game has to have both. You would probably agree with me, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this channel, but theme is very important, story is very important, but it also has to have some crunch, it has to have some meat to it. And Euro games may not be for me. Adventure games and role-playing games are very much so. The autonomy, the mastery, and the connectedness that I feel with adventure board games and role-playing games can be matched by anybody who plays mechanical games. The flow is the name of the game in this aspect. And how you achieve that flow, whether you're performing autonomous actions, you're authoring your own story, you're mastering a process, you're becoming better and better, or you're just feeling connected to the game or to other players if you're not playing solo. That is truly what matters. And in a group with all social benefits aside, is just as enjoyable as playing solo. And so I would just say to you, solo or not, keep exploring. Alright, let's turn this moon off. Will this be a good episode? All answers point to get good. Boop. Boop. Hey, you want to go play an adventure game? Are you kidding me? We're meeples. Come on, man, get real. Yeah, I'm throwing myself off the cliff. Ooh. Okay,